You're listening to Genuine Chit-Chat. This show is for real.
Hello there, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Genuine Chit-Chat. This week, I am joined by the host of the true crime podcast, Just The Tipsters, Melissa Morgan. So this was an extra long episode, so it has been split into two. This week is part one of our discussion where Melissa and I discuss true crime in general, why she started a podcast, some of her listeners, how law enforcement is involved, and then towards the end of this conversation we talk about Melissa's dog called Siren. Then part two of the conversation, which will be out next week, but is currently available for all Patreon supporters. That is where we speak about the more heavy stuff. That's when we speak about Melissa's recent passing of a loved one, how she dealt with the grieving process of that, how it's been since that's occurred, the memory she's held, and those sorts of things. So it is all about death and grief and dealing with yourself after something like that happens. And I think it's a very cathartic and very important conversation that a lot of people need to hear, either from their own experience they've already gone through, or potentially for things in the future. And Melissa was so open and honest with me in this conversation that I just hugely appreciate that as well. So that's going to be just about it from me, guys. Aside from there's going to be a quick promo from the Believer's Skeptic podcast, and then the conversation with Melissa will all start. And then I'll be back at the end of the conversation with Melissa to give you guys some information on what's coming up in part two, as well as some of the things about the future of Genuine Chit-Chat and a few other bits and pieces. So really hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. Make sure you check out the links in the description to where you can find Melissa and a lot of the other things that I've been involved with, including guest spots and etc. And yeah, guys, I just appreciate you all listening. So I present to you now the promo for the Believer's Skeptic podcast, and then part one of my conversation with Melissa Morgan.
Hello! Welcome to BSP Believer Skeptic Podcast.
The commercial where two idiots debate weird phenomena.
I'm Chris, I'm the Believer.
I'm Cody, I'm the Skeptic.
We are an LGBTQ paranormal comedy podcast.
And proud members of the Podmoth Network.
So, did you know there's a creature in Japan called a kappa that tries to suck a bejeweled life force out of your anus?
What? I did not, and I'm not even going to try debunking that. Instead, I volunteer as tribute.
Okay, so if you like your podcast a little spooky, a little mysterious, a lot gay, do we have the show for you?
Just listen and subscribe to BSP Believer Skeptic Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And for more content, search BSPodPHX on social media or visit bspodphx.com. Bye!
Welcome to Genuine Chit-Chat, where we have honest conversations with interesting people. And I'm your host, Mike Burton. Alright, so I've pressed record. I mean, you've got wonderful, what did you call them? Your ears, specifically.
Critter clips, KRITTER-KLIPS, which we both love words, apparently, in the spelling of them. So a woman in San Francisco makes these, and she was selling them at some weird-ass woo-woo convention I went to, and I'm like, I love these. So I have, over the years now, amassed 11 pairs. It's bad.
That's not bad. That's incredible.
Okay.
Okay, good. You're being yourself and doing what you want. I mean, you can't see it, but around me, there's just like lots of random things. There's Lego all around me. There's a Harry Potter chessboard made out of Lego next to me. There's a Millennium Falcon. There's plants over there. There's vinyls on the wall. There's comic books around me. Funko Pops. Like I'm all.
Oh my God, you have pops. You are everything.
Yeah, I do have a lot.
That's awesome.
I'm kind of a jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah, you are. Yeah. No, let's call you a Renaissance man.
That's it. I mean, do Renaissance men have tattoos? Yeah. I don't think they did. That's probably...
If they don't, they should. Okay, how many do you have?
Well, I got another one on the weekend, so I've got 3 in total.
Awesome.
So I've got 2 on my arm, and one that's now... One on my ankle is the newest one. That's only small.
What is it?
I can show you. And the listeners / watchers, if the video holds up and things, then they'll be able to see it.
Right.
But let me take my hoodie off.
And then take your pants off so we can see your ankle?
I don't need to take my pants off for that, or trousers, as we call it here. But
trousers.
It's Star Wars. Well, these are jogging bottoms more than anything. But
you did not get a Star Wars.
I got 2 Star Wars tattoos, actually. So there's that one, which is Darth Vader.
Holy shit, you. Holy shit.
That one.
Oh my gosh.
So that's going to be a Star Wars sleeve. And then my foot one, I got with a friend of mine who's going over to America, actually. He's been a best friend of mine for a while. God, this is going to be awkward. It's the sound of my chair. Yeah, I know. Get my leg out. It's like burlesque or something, isn't it? So,
okay.
So it's...
Oh my gosh. Are you kidding?
It's a clacker.
Wow. Yeah, I know. I knew what it was the second I saw it. I used to work in the film business.
Yeah.
That's kind of amazing.
You're one of the first people to see. I haven't even posted on social media yet, so you are.
Wow.
Aside from a couple of people in my work, I think, and my partner Megan, and obviously the tattooist, not many people have seen that. So
I feel very privileged. I just sent you pictures of two of mine. The first one is the one I got when I met Mark Humphreys.
That is
it's brilliant. A good policy, I think. And then I just got Justice on my arm in October because of a case we covered where a young girl, it was written in her font. So it's just it's on my forearm just as a reminder of why I do what I do. That's all.
Yeah, because you posted that on your Facebook group, didn't you? I remember seeing that.
Probably.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain because before we chatted, I was like, I say somewhat Facebook stalked you, but it was on your public Just the Tipsters page. So it's not quite, it was just,
right.
I was like, I haven't gone through, like I realized that I hadn't liked Just the Tipsters on Facebook, and I was like, what have I done?
What's wrong with you?
I know.
You're a terrible
person. Terrible podcast. I was terrible fan of the show. It's awful. I went on there and and you get so much engagement with your listeners, which is intriguing.
I do.
Yeah.
I have a problem. I'm way too accessible, and I'm a codependent people pleaser. And then I bend over backwards and then wonder why my back hurts. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah. I've been there. I've been there, done that. You know, my codependence, I mean, I've managed to solve that by having a podcast that forces me to talk to a variety of different people. So it's like I
love that.
Like I've described it as like my friends always say, I make my own life more difficult because I'm always busy. I'm always doing something. And it's right. Like this I'm quite manic is the wrong word because that insinuates bipolar, which is not what I have.
Right.
But it's that sort of high energy. I need to get the craziness out somehow. And the way I do that is having near enough 3 podcasts and doing everything, you know, tattoos, Lego, Star Wars, reading books all the time, staying up ridiculous o'clock at night reading. And then, I'm not even that tired all the time. I feel like I should be because I get less sleep than most, but maybe I'm in that rare 2% of people or 1% who need less sleep.
Yeah, I think that's a gift. You're the kind of people that get shit done.
Yeah, well, I try. I try my best, but I often get distracted by a lot of things. So I've got about 100 notebooks. If you see me writing down, because I've got my little notebook here, which is my second genuine Chit-Chat notebook, and then I've got my first genuine Chit-Chat notebook over here, which has got a few spare pages in that I use for guest spots, and then I've got my this notebook, which is my Patreon film notebook, and writing down guests in here, like potential guests that I want to get as well. And in fact, I've got Just the Tipsters written right there because when I started this year, I wrote down in 2021, with the end of 2021 for the start of 2022, I wrote down all these people that I was like, I need to have them on the show because I keep not doing it. And you've been on my list for ages thinking
That's nice.
So
that's really nice. I appreciate that. I'm not a great interviewer, which would be one of the reasons I wouldn't have you on unless of course you've killed someone or solved a murder, and then I would have you on. But I'm like envious of people like you who can talk very extemporaneously, and I can do that if I have bullet points and if it's a case I'm interested in, but I don't feel like I'm a great interviewer. And honestly, most people are not great talkers. At least people, you know what I mean? Like people in the law enforcement world, and oh boy, victims' families. It's sometimes like crawling through molasses to get, an interview. Yeah, I'm sure you know. Yeah.
And also one can, like, I'm not saying you would come across this way specifically, but some people can interpret, if you interview people who have gone through things, it can seem like taking advantage of people. And you never want to do that. It's like, hey, you guys have had a horrible tragedy happen to you. Let's put you in front of a camera and a microphone to help my show. Right. It's like, it's not that simple, because I've had people want to speak about difficult times as well as yourself.
Yep.
And it's not trying to take advantage, but it's kind of allowing people who want to have the right platform for it. And it's
right. It never feels that way. It never feels that way, like speaking to someone like you. And it's only happened a few times where someone has, it's always on social media, some lovely trollish person saying, oh, you're profiting off of people's strategies. I'm like, well, number one, I'm not profiting. Number two, go fuck yourself sideways. I'm not. And if they don't want to talk to me, they won't. I never, in my mind, at least, humiliate or embarrass anyone. People willingly want to talk. And if there's anything that, and I hate this term, it sounds a little trite, but, people say you're shining light on cases that, need to be talked about. So that's how I kind of rationalize it in my head. And I never want to feel like, I try to be compassionate to victims as well as their families. And I think I do a good job.
Yeah. I think your podcast, I don't listen to a lot of true crime. Because true crime, and this is what I want to speak to you about. True crime is not something that I am heavily intrigued by in itself.
Sure.
I've got a friend of mine called Janine Mercer. She has the Odd Entity podcast, and she does like true crime, but as well as like folklore and legends and kind of crazy things like that. And both your podcast, Just The Tipsters, and hers are the two sort of main true crime podcasts that I consume. And even then, it's like, I know certain individuals, including I think yourself, who consume a huge amount of true crime stuff, and that's completely fine.
Absolutely,
it's completely fine. Like nothing against people who do, but for me, I mean, once again, I listen to so many different things, and I have to listen to people's podcasts I have on the show, as well as doing research, and I'm listening to audiobooks all the time as well, and I'm massively into music, so I'm always listening to new music as well. So my partner Megan goes a bit mental, not in a bad way, but she's like, why do you always have to be listening to something? And it's like, because if I'm by myself or doing chores and there's silence, that's a period of time that I can be consuming content, and that's what I need. Always consuming. God bless.
Yeah, I mean, seriously. Yeah, I get you. I mean, yeah, I guess I'm similar, but a lot of what I listen to is either going to be music or true crime or other podcasts that are interesting to me. I don't have a huge wide swath of interest. Like I'm not listening to sports podcasts or anything like that. But yeah, I'm with you. I never really thought of myself as a big multitasker, but I definitely have to be. I'm definitely an audiophile. I have to be listening to something, while doing something else.
Yeah. I end up just daydreaming, getting lost in things. I'll just if it helps me stay on track a lot of the time, occasionally if a guest has been confirmed or something and they email me or message me and go, oh yeah, I can be on the show, blah, blah, blah. As soon as I stop doing whatever I'm doing, even if I'm at work or anything like that, if I'm not having some sort of audio stimulation, then my mind will start to wander, and I'll start thinking about, what questions can I ask about this? Oh, I need to check this bit out. And I'll be like, I need to write this down. Wait a minute, I'm at work. Right. I'm going to be doing not this thing. Right. I want to ask with you in podcasting then, I'm always intrigued by how people first heard of a podcast and how they first sort of got into them. So what was the first podcast you listened to, and what was your podcast origin story?
Well, I love telling this, but it's not comfortable. So I listened to an extraordinarily popular true crime podcast because I've loved true crime and mysteries and solving mysteries and law enforcement and the mentality behind someone who takes someone else's life and thinks they shouldn't have to pay since I was a kid. So I listened to a very popular podcast and thought, well, this is fucking awful. You're getting the victim's name wrong. You're two intelligent human beings, and you're fucking up. You're mispronouncing. I hate you right now. So I was like, I carried that sort of like resentment for like about a year. And I'm an old radio dog. I, have a bachelor's degree in broadcasting from a university in the state where I grew up, and getting a bachelor's degree in radio, TV, film is like getting a bachelor's degree in recess. Like, you can't really do a lot with it, but I worked in radio in the Cincinnati, Ohio area in the US. And I worked in radio in the Los Angeles, California part of the US. And I love radio. I'm much more auditory than visual. You could show me a whole shitload of things and I'm not sure I would grasp it. But auditorily, people have said to me, they're like, you hear things other people don't hear. And I'm like, yes, I do. I'm the bionic woman. Like my mom was in real estate when I was a kid, and she would show me like a plan for a new home that's being built. And she's like, so here's the bedroom and here's the door. And I'm like, that's a box. That's a line on it. I don't know what you're fucking talking about. I couldn't see in 3D. I just, it's not, I'm just much more auditory. So listened to the crappy podcast, built up enough resentment, which I think is how a lot of people start. They're like, well, I can do better than that. And I was convinced I could do better than that, even if I didn't have like a team of researchers behind me or some great equipment or, whatever. I knew I wouldn't mispronounce victims' names and I would get details right, that they would be like, it's not important. And I would be like, oh, it's so important. I was like totally offended. So I was lucky enough to be married to my amazing husband, who was a singer-songwriter and also had a small record label with 11 artists. So he had some great ass equipment. It was also a little old, like analog, but it was what he loved. And that's another thing that I think made our podcast sound really good, is that it wasn't tinny or digital. It was warm, like an FM radio station, way before you were born. Way before you were born. There was this thing called F. Because you studied history. But anyway, it's I love what he did. He made it sound like first of all, like a radio show, not a podcast. And that's something I loved. But yeah, we December of 2017, I was like, I'm going to do a true crime podcast, and then promptly forgot. And then my husband had a week off between Christmas and New Year's, and he goes, okay, so the studio's set up. And I'm like, for what? And he's like, for that podcast you're going to do. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. What? No. And he goes, you get your ass in there and you write 3 episodes and we're recording it now. And so I spent a couple days, and on the weekend we recorded 3 episodes, because he did all the research and said, put up 3 at once, and that's how you get started. And here, 4 years later, things, bumps in the road, things have happened, but I'm still trying. And I am so blessed that I have amazing relationships with people in law enforcement. I have victims' families who still keep in touch with me. I have listeners who, it started as a 12-year-old boy dick joke, just the tipsters. And it's turned into something viable. People call in legitimate tips that have actually helped solve cases.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. It started as a vanity project, something I wanted to do, and it's turned into one of the loves of my life.
Yeah, I've always found that when I speak to a lot of people who are podcasters, one of the things that is the least expected part, which is what I found, is the community element, not only from other podcasters, but also from the audience.
Yeah, I was amazed too. You're always going to have, I call it a function of becoming more popular. You're always going to have, weasel dicks who say terrible things, or, you talk too long. Yeah, that was one of my favorites. Like, you talk too much. It's a podcast. I'm not sure how you do a podcast and you don't talk. Shut your fucking pie hole. So yeah, I mean, you're always going to have those kind of things, but for the most part, the reception and the support is immeasurable. Like I can't, it's priceless. It's priceless. And people, say things like, you accompany me on my day, you accompany me at work, you accompany me on my commute, you accompany me on my 5-mile run. It's those kind of things that make it feel like you have an even closer relationship with people you've never met.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that being a podcaster kind of helps shine a light on the more positive parts of social media in a lot of ways, as opposed to like,
you're right.
Because I've, everyone's had interactions on social media that suck, but since I've been a podcaster, I've not really had that. I mean, maybe it's because my show isn't quite big enough, and then when it becomes, when it becomes massive, when I become the next Joe Rogan, then I'll get all the shit,
Right. You'll get like half the shit. You won't get all the shit, but it'll be, I'm going to say 60-40. Yeah. The more popular you become, it definitely, people just can't take the fact that you're happy and successful. I don't know what that's about, but yeah.
It's more about them, isn't it? It's one of the things about
absolutely.
The majority of negativity in humans in all manners of life throughout all of history is not, the victim is not the problem. It's what the attacker is. There's something wrong with the attacker. Every bully has got their own bully or their own demons, and it's just like the kind of chain, how far up it goes, which is the sort of sad part of it. But with true crime, so, I mean, from when I was younger, I've always had an intrigue into the macabre, into death, into those sort of things. And my although true crime hasn't been something that has specifically piqued my interest, serial killers is. I'm very intrigued by that. I took psychology in college. Well, actually, for you guys, I didn't go to university, which is your version of college.
Right.
So I didn't go to that. It's the one below that. So for us, it goes school, secondary school, college, then university. But I think your guys is like high school, like end of high school-ish.
It's high school.
Yeah, but anyway, I was like 16 to 18 years old, 2 years in college, and I took psychology then. You know, I was very intrigued by, you know, Milgram and Freud and lots of the psychologists, but I was like, I want to know about the serial killers. I want to know what is inside someone's brain, kind of that you alluded to earlier, which is, you know, that makes someone think they can kill someone. And that's incredible, not in a good way, but in a very intriguing way in itself. But then when you get someone who's a serial killer, that's like a whole nother level, because, you know, killing one person can often be an in the moment thing, crime of passion. It can be something that's plotted out for revenge. But when you get someone who's a serial killer, that's pathological. So
totally,
it's what about it? I know you kind of touched upon it slightly earlier, but in any more detail of like with true crime in itself, has that always been something that was a passion of yours for serial killers, and then it turned into it, like from a young age up to now? What about it kind of intrigues you the most?
Well, like you, since I was a kid, I always loved the macabre. Halloween, favorite holiday of, it's not a holiday, but favorite event of the year. I also had a big crush on Bela Lugosi, and I was a big vampire fan as a young person. I was a vampire every year for Halloween. I really like vampires, and I love the idea of, you know, undead, plus the fact, you know, Dracula was a very sexy dude. I was really disappointed.
Vampires are a very sexual being, you know?
Totally. And yet, you know, I mean, you can equate sticking your fangs into someone's neck with stabbing someone with, you know, penetration of the body. It's all the same kind of thing. But yeah, I was really disappointed when I read Dracula, because I was like, you know, Bram Stoker, you need to sex it up a little bit. This is boring shit. It's way too many words. I sound like Salieri talking about Mozart. Way too many notes. Way too many words. Bram Stoker, way too many. But yeah, I've always loved vampires. So I think I was 12 or 13 when I found an old copy of Helter Skelter for $0.25 at a yard sale. And I bought the book, and it had pictures. And even then, you know, what would that have been, like the late 70s, early 80s? I guess it was, they had like some of the pictures, you know, had a bar across the victim's face. Some of them were just like an outline of some of the victims. And I was like, oh, what does that look like without, you know, the outline? And so I was fascinated. I was also convinced Charles Manson was going to come to Kentucky where I lived and kill me. Why? I don't know. I'd never done anything wrong to him, but I just assumed it was like, he's on his way and I need to prepare. So I think that was why I, you know, he'd already been adjudicated and was in prison, but I just, you know, I was like, I just knew it was going to happen. So I was already into the true crime genre as a young person. And then, you know, of course, so many TV shows came out that were fascinating, and the ones that were more of a docuseries that weren't, you know, like a recreation or a dramatization. I was fascinated by what law enforcement went through, what, you know, they became more open about forensics files became a big deal. You can, you know, any hotel you're in the United States, it's going to be running hot and cold all day long. You can catch up on many years of forensics files. But I fell in love with that. The fact that a detail like someone leaving a hair or saliva or something like that could eventually, when science caught up, catch them, just like filled my heart. So I, unlike you, not a fan of the serials. Big fan, listen to me, fascinated by someone who, you know, so it was boiled down for me by a pretty interesting detective who said there's 3 reasons people kill: sex, money, and revenge. And I'm like, oh, he's full of shit. There's got to be more reasons. No, there's not. It boils down to sex, money, and revenge. Every crime, every murder, sex, money, or revenge. It's sometimes maybe it's all 3, but it's, you know, the sexually motivated crimes are a little more odd to me because it's a feeling, it's a experience I can't imagine someone enjoying. Also, serials, I think, are so hard to define. and figure out, like you were talking, it's a pathology that people still spend years, trying to figure out. Like, they examined Ted Bundy's brain, thinking, like what you'd said earlier, they say hurt people, right? Like that he had terrible parents, and there were things in his childhood, not enough to make someone kill, 40 women or whatever. But they examined his brain and there weren't any lesions or issues with the limbic system that needed to be constantly, whatever. I was just like, wow, that's some shit right there. I mean, that's some shitty shit right there. He didn't really have, not that anyone has an excuse, but he didn't have,
an explanation,
the things you would look for. Yeah. And then there was that, that theory that was for many years called the Mcdonald Triad, where there are 3 things that can predict a serial killer: bedwetting, fire starting, and animal torture. So I went to bed till I was like 5. I loved fire and would light matches and watch it. I've never heard an animal, but I literally thought I was 2/3 of a serial killer for a long time. I'm like, oh my God, I have to watch myself as I mature. I don't want to be a serial killer. And I couldn't even, my husband would be like, you take bugs and put them outside. You won't even kill a bug. And I'm like, you're right. Okay, I'm not going to kill anyone. Or yeah. So I'm still pretty fascinated by fire, and I have not wet the bed in a very long time, as far as you know. So.
I mean, I did. I stopped wetting the bed when I was youngish, but then in primary school, so around the age of 8 or 9, I went for a phase of wetting the bed again. That was mainly because I was getting bullied, so I think that's part of the reason. And then when that stopped, I stopped wetting the bed, and I haven't since. Yeah, it is good.
Is Megan there? Because I'd like to confirm that.
I mean, she's not. She's actually in bed, wetting the bed. No, but she's. Well, you mentioned about how it's getting late and things. I'm very much a night owl.
Night owl.
Megan's an early bird. I'm a night owl. So she'll go to bed.
How do you do that? I love that, because I was an early bird and my husband was, I think a lot like you, a 24-hour owl.
Yeah, I can.
He only needed about 4 hours of sleep a night.
Yeah, I'm not quite there. I'm
right.
I can be at times if it calls for it. Yeah, it's more so that everything is so interesting when I'm awake. You know, sleeping is kind of boring, and although it's necessary, I'm
right.
So Megan normally gets to bed like 9-10ish is ideal for her when she has work in the morning, but she gets up earlier than I do for work. Whereas me, I like 12. Like I'll go to sleep. 12 is like the earliest for me. Like when Megan goes to bed at 10, I'm like, cool, I've got the rest of the evening to myself. 2, 3, 4 hours of just reading or video games or anything. It works well. I can get up early, but yeah, it's there was a point I was going to make here to the early bird sleeping thing, but I've got completely. Oh, it's because we're talking about wetting the bed and serial killer. So fire. There we go. I knew I was getting at some point. I think with fire though is starting fires is fun, not destroying people's property and livelihood or killing anyone, but fire is such a, I think it's one of the most core things about being a person is enjoying fire, because I think one of the earliest traits of humanity that turned them into the modern day human, was cooking food, eating cooked meat, and then the amount of nutrition and things.
Heating your dwelling. Water.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah, the caves and things. Yeah, exactly. Comfort. Yeah. So I don't think. I mean, I've never been big into hurting animals. I've always. I'd sooner hurt a person than an animal. Easy, I could punch a person in the face. If you tell me to kick a dog,
they
I'll
probably
cry.
Deserved it.
Yeah,
right.
You could excuse a reason
because a human probably deserved it. Yeah,
you could always think of a reason for a human to deserve like a nut punch, but you can't think of a reason a dog would. That's horrible.
No, I would never kick a dog in the nuts, and hopefully they've been, spayed or neutered. But anyway, yeah.
So I want to ask, with true crime, I've noticed that although I want to clarify to any listeners, if before anyone potentially gets upset, this is not right. I'm just going to say there's a common thread that a lot of the demographic of individuals who enjoy true crime, it seems to be primarily women. Now, obviously, there are lots of men who like true crime and things. Right. However, just from the amount of podcasts that have got women at the helm, the amount of interaction on social media that I've only seen a narrow amount, but it seems like there is more engagement with women. And I've heard a lot of women sort of explain their theory as to why that is. I didn't know if you had a theory, and I want to clarify to listeners, I'm not saying only women listen to true crime. It just seems like a demographically skewed thing. And I didn't know if you had a theory or a thought as to why that might be.
I think my theory is the same as most people's theory, is that women are mostly the victims. That's, it's, I don't know how the percentages break down. I end up covering as many cases about men that are the victims. Well, maybe not as many, but it's definitely more of an even thing than people think. But I'm going to say this. I think it's kind of a two-part answer. I think women are mostly the victims. I also think that women's cases get put into the media a lot more than men's. And that's something I try to work on, because some of the cases I've covered, I call it the blonde white woman syndrome, which, I'm blonde and white, but I'm old, so it doesn't matter. If I were a young, beautiful blonde white woman and I went missing, you'd fucking hear about it where you are. If you're a 50-year-old white guy who lives a happy life and no one knows what happened to you, go fuck yourself. Nobody's looking for you. I mean, case in point, one of the cases that made me start this podcast, a local man, 58-year-old man, went missing from his home, and they told his wife that maybe he had gone to Costa Rica.
That's oddly
and
specific.
He's happily married. Oddly specific and shitty and dismissive.
Oh, it's horrible shit. But the thing I was like, why?
Yeah.
Of all things, Costa Rica, not just he left you and went somewhere.
Right.
Let's specifically tell you we think he went here.
Yeah, maybe he's in Costa Rica, was the lead detective's exact quote to the wife. And then, there was blood found behind his easy chair, and his nephew is a pile of shit. And 3.5 years later, we got him arrested and indicted, and we're in the middle of it now. But yeah, that's the thing. I was like, how can they not be looking for him? I mean, I was just like stunned. Why aren't we looking for everyone?
Yeah.
And granted, there's a lot of missing persons where someone walks away from their own life. It is not a crime as an adult to walk away from your life. If you're a child, it's different. If you're underage, it's different. But if you're an 18-year-old to 77-year-old white guy, tough shit, buddy. You're on your own. It's terrible. So that's, I know that's a long answer, but I do think that women, and it's almost like, we were talking about, dogs being descended from wolves, women descended from women. We are sort of brought up to keep our hackles raised and be aware of our surroundings, and, not to not trust people, but, there's been a lot of cases where someone thought someone was being kind to them, and it turned out to be very opposite. So I think women consume true crime in a larger percentage than men. But I will tell you, I'm thrilled to death when I get an email, a message on any social media from a dude who says they listen. And this is, again, a little bit of a disparity. Dudes typically find dudes hosting true crime more palatable. So when a dude doesn't care that I have a vagina, and I and I'm pretty good storyteller about true crime, it makes me feel like the world is hopefully shifting, because you can't imagine the number of comments people get. It's like, hi, I'd like you to recommend some true crime podcasts for me, but I don't like women's voices.
Right.
It happens a lot. I
would think it's the opposite. That's quite bizarre. For me, I mean, I've always been, I don't know. I mean, I always like strong women anyway. That's like my Achilles heel, I would say. If it's strong women,
your parents did good. Your parents did good then.
Yeah. One hopes. But it's in a variety of ways, be it, Gwendolyn Christie, who Brienne of Tarth in Game of Thrones, for people who aren't aware, like a woman like that, like an Amazonian woman, or an actually woman in power, be it real or not, any kind of sense of that. So whenever it's a woman narrating or reading things, I find that more interesting most of the time than men. But also I have to hear my stupid voice all the time. So it's like, it's refreshing to hear someone else nattering on rather than it being me all the time.
Anyone who hosts a podcast gets tired of hearing their own voice, but I am happy with either. I honestly don't have a preference. I love true crime podcasts narrated by men and true crime podcasts hosted and narrated by women. I love them both.
Yeah. I mean, I will clarify, if people saw my podcasting library, I think it is actually slightly skewed towards men, but that is not because I like hearing men more. It's more just whatever the content is, regardless of the person's anything.
Subject matter.
It's just content is content, and just, if the quality is okay and if they speak in an all right way. As long as those two parameters are met, then I don't really care who it is speaking in those sort of things. But the theory that I heard about true crime is, and I don't know how true this is, and I can't speak because I'm, in the privilege scale. I'm pretty high up when it comes to being, a white millennial living in England who's not ridiculously low down on the poverty scale. So, my perspective is always one of the things I want to hear other people's perspectives on. But with true crime, I heard one of the theories is something along the lines of, like women getting the power back in some way, hearing about sort of, I know you say that it's not always sort of women who are the victims, but I think, as you say, because the media potentially shined a light on that, or because of women's history or whatever the contributing factors may be, is that women often like to hear about these things because it's, as you say, the sort of awareness of it. It's kind of, it gives them power back hearing about these kind of circumstances happening. Whereas men are like, I don't, like men don't, I think, this isn't now an assumption, but I wonder if women more frequently are worried about, violence, obviously sexual assault, and also murder more frequently than men are. So if you hear about it more frequently, I wonder if that's a degree of comfort covering over the existential worry of that kind of thing.
That's a great theory. Yeah, it's like if your senses are satiated with stories of this, that's an interesting theory. I always thought it was because women were more often the victims than men, but that's actually a great theory. The more you hear about something, the more comforting it becomes because you're not afraid of it anymore, even if the stories are horrific. And that, to that degree, I will tell you, I have evolved because when I started the podcast, I never wanted to cover a case that was open, that was unsolved, and I never wanted to cover a missing person. Just couldn't handle it. Everything had to be wrapped up with a beautiful bow and like a Tiffany box. I wanted every, T crossed, every I dotted. I wanted it solved. And for the first year, I would only do solved cases because that gave me comfort. Like, okay, someone got caught, someone got indicted, someone was arrested, they're off the street. That person got whatever that form of justice is. In my mind, there's no closure if someone loses a family member, but you can hope for some modicum of justice. And that almost has to be personal to you, whatever justice means to you, whether it's someone, put to death, the death penalty, or spend the rest of their life in prison or something like that. But yeah, so after about a year, I started getting emails. Hey, would you cover this missing person? Or this person's case is close to me, my family, or a friend. I know that this happened. It's an unsolved case. Could you please cover it? And I would be like, oh no. So I would do one a month. And then it just did not take long before it was 6 out of 8 would be unsolved cases. And this is terrible to say this, but it's the only way I can voice it because it's the truth. I occasionally do a solved case as a palate cleanser for myself because I can't. I sit up at night. Unlike you, I can't get by on a small amount of sleep. I need a bunch. I don't get it. I don't usually get it. So I'm up at night like, oh, wait a minute. What about that? I'm constantly reading, looking, consuming, theorizing, writing down notes like I could fucking, solve anything. But yeah. Believe me, these things occupy my brain way too often. So occasionally I'm like, I have to do one that's solved. I can't take it anymore. So that's how it kind of is going now.
I mean, that's part. I'm in the same boat as that. That's one of the reasons I don't listen to a huge amount of true crime and missing persons thing. Where it's like, it's like there's a minor spoiler for the film Zodiac. So I love David Fincher. Okay, I love. My gosh, his filmmaking style is incredible. So I watched Seven, and then Fight Club is one of my favorite films ever. His the American version of Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is amazing, and there's so many films he's done. And when I was really into Fincher, I think when I kind of discovered Fight Club, as most people do in their teenage years, it's like
right, of course.
The famous college poster, and everyone knows about you don't talk about Fight Club. And so I got really into Fincher, and then I need to remind you, there's a video on YouTube by the Nerd Writer about how David Fincher his cinematography works. I'd never seen it before. A friend of mine showed it to me. It's incredible. I'll have to send it to you.
I can't wait.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Can't wait.
Completely changed my perception on him, even though I loved him anyway. But with Zodiac, I watched that when I was in the midst of my Fincher Fest, and I was like, yes, right, this is one of the only films of his I haven't seen, and I was like, I can't wait. And then I watched Zodiac, and I got to the end, and I didn't know anything about the Zodiac Killer. Over here, it's not spoken about that much. Obviously, over in America, it's much of a bigger thing. And so I watched the film, and then it ends, and obviously, they don't get the killer. There's very huge hints of who it is, and it's almost confirmed who it is, but you don't get that, and that isn't the point of the story. But when I finished that, I was like, wait, what? And it ended. I was like, I just spent 2.5 hours watching this film and it's not even solved. I was like, I feel robbed. It kind of pissed me off a little bit. And I was like, obviously, he can't formulate. The point of the film is kind of true to life. So it was like, but that thing really bothered me. So I think with the missing persons thing, it's that closure. It's like reading a book and then someone's ripped out the last 3 pages and you're like,
you're right.
I need the full stop. I can't. You can't finish on a comma. What's wrong with you?
Exactly.
So yeah,
exactly. And Will Sarzan, the man that went missing in my area here, I do not like the out of doors. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm not an outdoorsy kind of girl. And I volunteered for 3 months to look with a group of searchers who were wonderfully trained and helped train me. And I learned so much about a missing person, what to look for, what not to look for, what to, carrying a piece of PVC pipe to push, shrubs to the side. Also, in case you run into a snake, stuff like that. I mean, it was fascinating. I had no idea. I assumed if I found bones, which I found a lot of, not human, they would be white and look like, Fred Flintstone, like something from Bedrock. And the body has so much, soft tissue that a bone looks a lot like a stick. A human bone looks brown because it's had, things seep into it. So it was fascinating. I found more goat femurs than I would be like, look what I found. They're like, put the goat femur down, Melissa. Just put the fucking goat femur down. So yeah, apparently Southern California was overrun with goats at some point. I don't know why, but I found a shitload of goat femurs. But yeah, it was very enlightening and fascinating. Figuring out a grid, a way to walk so that we didn't miss anything. It was, it was a very fascinating experience for me and I learned a lot, and a missing person's just tripped me up. I mean, I sit up at night thinking, where have we not looked? Where can we double time look? Where can, so yeah, unsolved cases, the same thing. And I'm very blessed. I have some amazing listeners and some great people in my life who care enough to message me and ask my opinion and tell me things. And I have this theory that a lot of people are armchair detectives. They really, want to figure out a puzzle. They want to solve something and bring, peace or resolution to someone's family or, it's an interesting world being a human sometimes.
Yeah, being a human is so weird. All the weirdest things. I mean, it's like
a fascinating journey.
Yeah, it is. But I always think like linking. They said it in Dogma, the Kevin Smith movie, and it's like sex is the prime example I use for how weird people are. It cracks me up. Like not during it's a very fun and somewhat serious endeavor, but you think about it. In retrospect, it's like the things people say, the things that you like, even, the smells or whatever else that you enjoy. And then when you're out of that frame of mind and you look back and you're like, fucking hell, it's so weird.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's hilarious. Yeah. Yeah.
That's just one of the examples I use about, it's just how weird it is being a person of just all these weird little quirks and things. And I just imagine, like, I don't believe in God, but it's one of those ideas that, and once again, this came from Dogma, is like, of course there's a God. Have you seen sex? How funny is that? And it's like, that's a really, as Alan Rickman says it, and it's like, that's a very funny idea of it. But I want to ask, still sticking with the true crime and missing persons element, something that comes up, I think it came up maybe in the first, because I went back and obviously listened to the first podcast you did to compare it to the more recent ones. And I'll clarify, all of your first podcasts are still bangers. So, anyone who hasn't listened to Just The Tipsters, you can go back and listen to the start all the way through, consistently amazing. But
thank you.
Police and law enforcement involvement is something that's come up quite a lot, both in your show, but also true crime in general. And the question I have is sort of two-pronged, which is, do you think in general, law enforcement do enough? And this coming off that element is that, do you think that the not even renaissance, the golden age almost of true crime over the last couple of decades of the accessibility in the podcasting realm, has that helped law enforcement kind of like a fire up their ass to be like, lots of people are going to be paying attention to this, you kind of need to get your finger out? That's kind of my query to you of like, are law enforcement doing enough, and do you think true crime has affected that in any way?
That is a great question. That is a great question. I love how much research, time, and effort you put into talking about the topics on your podcast. So yes, and yes, although I'm not sure it's two questions, but law enforcement, I have a soft spot. I'm going to say 95% of anyone who's taken the vow to serve and protect are good people. Are there shitty cops? Oh, fuck yes. Are there shitty plumbers? Yes. Are there shitty doctors? Yes. Yeah. Usually plumbers aren't going to be responsible for your life. They can make your life hell, but a doctor and a cop should be held to a higher standard. Mm-hmm. Most of them that I've met are good people. You're always going to have a clinker because it's on the human scale, right? I have a huge soft spot for those in law enforcement. It's life shortening. They a lot of them I know have health issues at a younger age than they would because they don't process a lot of what they see or go through. They work tirelessly. They don't sleep a lot. Do they let things fall through the cracks? Yes, they're human beings. Has true crime helped them? Yes, it has. It has probably also been a burr in their saddle for some of them. But I will be very honest with you. I, started this doing only solved cases, and I was sort of bound by what I could find via research. And then when I decided to dig deeper, it's not even a rabbit hole. It's basically me digging to China. It became obsessive and a thing I loved. And the biggest amount of pushback I ever got is from smaller agencies. Larger agencies are like, fuck yes, I'll talk to you. How can you help me? Can you say this? Can we do this? How about this? Are you busy Thursday? Smaller agencies are like, well, when I need you to talk to Cheryl down in records, and I'm like, so it's literally one or the other. It's black or white. It's never gray. They're either, here is every file we have. You look at it. Maybe you have a better idea, and I'm like, I'm nothing. And I've been given a couple of very kind gifts from those in law enforcement. They're called challenge coins. I guess they were a thing like with the military. A couple of really beautiful challenge coins. And the last one I got was in December of 2021. And the cold case detective said, here, I wanted to give you this. This is celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Homicide Bureau being around. And it's the LA County Sheriff's Department Homicide Bureau, which is the largest homicide bureau in the United States. And I was like, well, this is really nice. He goes, yeah, you've helped solve a couple cases. And I go, no, I have not. You solved cases. I'm the big mouth bitch with the microphone. And he was like, you shined a light on cases and made people in law enforcement pay attention, including myself. And then I just sat there and cried. So, I know I haven't done anything to solve a case. Have I been blessed to have people in law enforcement call me and say, would you cover this case? I need to get the word out. That is like a true gift, a priceless gift. I've had one detective say, you know more about this case than I do. And I'm like, that is bullshit. I only know what you've told me. And he's like, you remember everything though. And I'm like, well, that's a problem. Yes, I do. I don't forget the details, but yeah. So, I do think true crime is a big help. I will be honest, it makes me very angry when people say that podcast solved that crime. No, it did not. It may have lit a fire under the ass of those in law enforcement. It may have brought a cold case back to their attention they needed to look at, but they fucking did the work. Podcasts are amazing and wonderful, and they are entertainment. It doesn't matter the topic. It's entertainment. It's for, it's something for our ear holes. I'm a podcast fan, like you're a podcast fan, like millions of people are. When I started in 2018, there were 400,000 podcasts. Now there's over 2 million. You could find a podcast concerning the little finger on your right hand. There's that's the whole point of a podcast. It's niche. Mm-hmm. It's niche entertainment for what your interest is. So yeah, I do think true crime has helped, law enforcement for sure, if they're willing to be open and let them in. Mm-hmm. That's how I think of it. And I'm really blessed that I've had some people open to whatever they take. Detectives a lot of time in the United States work Monday through Friday. They take their Saturdays or Sundays when they could be with their family, their little precious time off to talk to me because the case is so important to them. I mean, that's not because they want to be, behind a microphone or they're vain. They usually can't stand to be in front of cameras. And most of them are not good at it, but they're just not. It's not what they thought part of the job was going to be. But if they are well-spoken and want to present a case, I am so happy that they trust me enough to do that. And I've just never had anyone be like, you fucked up. You did this. You let something out you shouldn't have. I've used a couple of surreptitious names for some detectives who didn't want their names used. But other than that, I'm just, knock wood, I'm really blessed to have a great relationship with law enforcement across the country.
Yeah, I will say that law enforcement and individuals in the emergency services, as well as doctors and nurses, those jobs are the hardest jobs on the planet by a country mile. Like, you've got, even the hardest programming job or most stressful salesman job, you've got nothing on, doctors, nurses, firefighters, paramedics, ambulance, and obviously people in law enforcement. It's a whole other ball game. The perception of humanity in those roles is intense. And although I believe mainly across the world, there are elements of law enforcement that could do better. The fact that,
absolutely,
there's so much that there is obviously an area of improvement, but the stress of that job is just unfathomable. And I wouldn't,
absolutely,
I couldn't do that job because I think like you in a lot of ways, I can be very obsessive over things. And like what I like about my job, I just work in insurance. I work for a broker. I deal with claims. So we have businesses that are our clients. They send me claim information. I work out who's at fault. I figure out the admin details. I do a lot of motor claims and stuff. So I have to look at road markings and etc. And it's like, that's quite low pressure because the worst thing that happens is the business that I'm doing it for. If I fuck everything up, the business just, they have to pay a little bit more money in their insurance premium. Like, that's generally speaking the worst case scenario if I've really messed things up. Whereas, if you mess up law enforcement or a doctor or anything, you not only can potentially ruin or end someone's life, but the ripple effects of that can be endless. It's
absolutely.
Phenomenal. And if I had the job I've got now, when it gets to 5 o'clock and I sign off and stuff, it's gone. I don't even think about it. I get home, I start podcasting, doing Star Wars stuff, whatever. I don't think about those things, and I'm always thinking about podcasting even when I'm at work because it's something I'm passionate about. But if I had to do if I found out someone's little girl got murdered or, God forbid, like raped or anything like that, just knowing that exists is enough to really get me to my core. Having to investigate that and it be on my shoulders to potentially give this family some degree of closure, or worrying that whoever did this is still out there and others could suffer from that. Like, that in one instance is enough to drive anyone mad. Doing that on the daily for your career, for oh, I've solved this one, well, here's another one. It's like, it's unfathomable. I hugely respect people in law enforcement and any of those emergency services because it's just, I couldn't do that. Or if I did, it
would
with you. Consume me.
Right. I am with you. It takes a very special person to be a first responder, which is what we call them in the U.S. First responders. It kind of fits an umbrella over all of that. But I am totally with you. It takes a very special person. And like I said, I know it has been taxing, but it is the people that I think do the best at what they do are probably like you and maybe me. They are obsessed. Mm-hmm. Most detectives retire and can't take it and go back and then work on cold cases.
Yeah.
And they get hired back as, like a contractor, because they're retired, they're getting their pension, and they give them like, oh, that's my girl dog. Should I go get her?
You can go get the dog. That's not a problem at all.
Guess what her name is? Siren.
Oh.
And not because she's not because she's luring sailors to the rocks. It's because she's a loudmouth bitch. So let me go get her.
Yeah, it's perfectly fine.
I'm sorry.
That was amazing.
She's the best. She's the best. She's a terrible, terrible, awful dog. This is a pretty interesting thing. Ah! No! You can tell how much she pays attention to everything. She was found in a field in Northern California, and she was pulled out of a shelter by a organization called Paws for Life, PAWS, and they train inmates to train dogs. So she spent 6 weeks in prison with an inmate, and he was responsible for her care, her feeding, her grooming, and training her. So, my husband and I had lost 2 dogs in 4 months in 2020. And I was like, we're never going to find me, and it took, actually in 2019, and it took about 10 months to find her. I kept looking at shelters, and then we wandered into a pet store, and they were having an adoption fair, and they were like, we saw her picture, and we both fell in love with her. And they were like, oh, she's on her way down here. And I'm like, from where? And they're like, Northern California. And I'm like, aren't there enough dogs in Southern California? Why do we have to get, is she fancy? Is she from San Francisco? What the fuck? But she was found in a field. And, they bring her out, and she just runs to us. And I'm like, she's mine. And she's a fucking asshole. And she's a fucking asshole. And they're like, her name is Siren. And I'm like, oh my God, like Greek mythology. And they're like, well, no. So it took about a week, and we had her here, and I left to go run an errand. And my husband, she didn't know my husband was here. He was in his office. And I came home, and his face is like this, and his eyes are really big. I'm like, what's going on? He goes, I understand Siren now. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, you left. And 5 minutes later, she sat on the steps going, woo! Like the extended dance mix version of a fucking police siren. So That's my girl.
That's amazing. I don't actually have a dog at the moment. We've got a little tortoise, which is the polar opposite of your dog. Very slow and chilled out. Her name is Wicket. In fact, I haven't got she's sleeping, but you can see there's our picture there. There she is in a little.
Oh my gosh, it's your little holiday outfits. I love her even more because I dress Siren in sweater. Oh, there might be a delivery coming. Hold on a minute. Siren! Oh, her name is Siren Marie Bitchface Morgan Humphreys. Anyway, there you go. That's
amazing. But like we've got dogs are incredible. We are too lucky to have dogs, and like I've had, when I was younger, I had rabbits and cats because my mum is a cat person and my dad wasn't fussed about having animals. And he wasn't one of the dads who's like not fussed and then fell in love. He was like, no, I'm not fussed. And then we got them. He's like, yeah, I still don't care. So, okay, cool, soulless. But Megan has never had any pets. We're cat, well, apart from like a fish. But like that's more of, I call that almost like a living screensaver. Just like, you can't.
It is a little bit, yeah.
It's just like, hey, look at my cool aquarium. It's like, cool, you own fish now.
I don't like aquarium. Yeah, I don't like it at all, but a turtle, yeah.
Yeah, they're amazing, and they have such personality, and you call her name and she'll come to you. I love her. But yeah, she's adorable, and she's got a personality, and my mum's got her, well, we call her because we thought she was a girl. We've seen her penis. It's scary. So she's not a girl, but we call her a girl, so whatever. World's first non-binary tortoise, whatever. But
God, you've seen your mom's turtle's penis.
Well, I've seen our tortoise's penis, but our mum's tortoise is a sibling. Too? Is a sibling.
Oh, okay. All right.
So my mum's tortoise is called Humphrey. Our tortoise is called Wicket, but our tortoise is a boy, and we think Humphrey's a girl. So we got the genders completely wrong. But this is
perfection.
When you get the two tortoises together, they are completely different personalities. We wanted to get Wicket because she is a hungry girl, and both myself and Megan love food, and so. She was, when we got her, my aunt and uncle have tortoises, and then they had babies, and they had like a whole bunch of them. Like 19 was the first batch, which is insane.
Oh my goodness, that is.
They've had 3 batches now. And they sell them for like £100 each. So it's
holy crap. Okay.
Yeah. It's a good business model. Somehow make tortoises breed, which is a very difficult thing to do.
Turtle pimps. You're in for turtle pimps. What the fuck is this? This is terrible.
It's insane. But like this, when we went to choose our tortoise, we saw there was I think 7 of them left, and my auntie put down a head of lettuce, and all the tortoises looked at it and didn't care. My tortoise, with care, looked at it and sprinted straight for it. And we're like, we want that one. And
That's your baby.
Yep, that's it. And so the reason I'm talking about these elements is because like Megan's obsessed with dogs. You know, because we're currently living in a flat and then we're saving up and we've had the orders and the offer's been accepted, the work's been done. Hopefully in the next 2 months, we're going to have a house, which is going to be delightful.
God, congratulations.
Thank you. It's
a huge life goal to get to. That's amazing. And you're so young.
I mean, it's taken a long time and a lot of saving. But we finally seemingly got there and stuff. And we're going to do the house a bit. It's got a carpet in the bathroom, which is insanity.
Who does that? Yeah, that's
insane people. It's just a piss sponge.
That's from a serial killer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, piss sponge. That's a serial killer piss sponge. Yeah.
Disgusting. But when we get this house and we've done it up and a few things there, then the next thing we're doing is getting a dog. And it's just like Megan has legitimately like teared up just thinking about how happy she is. She's going to be getting a dog. And like, I'm super excited as well because, you know, I love animals and things and my family members and things have had dogs. But it's just like, you know, I can't be too excited.
Already. Yeah.
I can't be too excited because Megan's so excited. So I have to kind of rein her in a bit to be like, we still have a few months to go. There's still many steps before we get the dog. But it's like, I'm so excited to have a little ball of energy. So I am envious of you to have a Siren.
Because gosh, fucking asshole. She's
the best
total fucking asshole. But she's like, the love of my life. You are like my husband was, and I am like Megan was, and we had 2 dogs. And I was like, don't you think, we had 1 dog. And I was like, don't you think he needs a friend? And he's like, not really. But then I get the girl dog and I'm like, and the boy dog was like, why did you do this to me? You ruined my life. But they were together for, 12 years. And then, they both passed away in the beginning of 2019. And I was like, before they passed away, I'm like, don't you think we need another dog? And my husband's like, look, there's 2 of us and 2 of them. You get another one and they're a pack and they will overtake us. I'm like, they're 35 and 60 pounds. They don't even add up to what one of us weighs. They're not going to overtake us, but he would not let me have a third. So
yeah, Megan wants 2
okay with that
as well. And then immediately I'm just like, we don't need 2. We've got space for 1. And we're going to get the other one eventually, no doubt, because they live for...
Don't you think Wicket needs a friend?
Megan says that all the time.
Yeah, Wicket needs a friend.
Yeah, I can't let you ever talk to Megan because you'll convince her. She legitimately times said, I almost went to like a pet store and just came home with a tortoise, and then you wouldn't be able to tell me I couldn't have it.
What are you going to do? Say no?
I'm not that heartless.
Fuck you, buddy.
I agree.
No, you're outvoted. Totally outvoted. If Megan ever needs like backup, just tell her to call me. I am here for her because Wicket needs a friend. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, our friend's going to be the dog. I mean, not really, because you have to really be very careful with dogs and tortoises, because a dog will be like, why is that rock moving? I'm going to kill it. It's like, no, calm down.
That's right. I'm going to lick its legs until it's my back. Yeah, exactly.
So I want to speak with you about something we've touched upon and alluded to, and it is a bit of a change of conversation, but it is something that you said you are willing to speak about, and it is something that's very important, obviously in life in general, but it's something that has happened to you recently, and you are very open about it on your podcast, and it's about Mark. So I wondered if you would, in as little or as much detail as you're willing to give, talk about Mark, basically, in all aspects of him, and what recently happened with him.
Yeah. We met, and we were not each other's types. He liked Earth mothers who wore tie-dye and had long hair, and I liked bad boys who hated women. So that was, we were just not, but sometimes there's a larger force at work, and we met, and 3 years later, we ran back into each other. And he had grown really long hair and a ponytail. And, I was never going to be an Earth mother. But anyway, we, clicked, and we dated for a few years and got married in 2001. We got married 3 weeks after 9/11. And that was fun. But we made it work. And we were married almost 20 years, 3 weeks shy of 20 years. And he passed away suddenly in September of 21, sitting in his car in our driveway. And honestly, if you have to pick a way for someone you love to go, either in their sleep or something that happened to him, that's not such a bad way to go.
And that's the end of part 1. Thanks as always for tuning in, friends. As I said in the intro, part 2 will be out next week on the usual feed, and we do speak about, as you could tell by the way this conversation ended, a lot more darker and heavier subject matter. So there's a few details in the description talking about what is coming up in part 2, but if you can't wait that long, you can't wait a week, and you want to support the show, please go over to patreon.com/genuine chit-chat. For as little as £1 a month, you'll get early access to Genuine Chit-Chat episodes when they're split into part 1 and part 2. You get access to both parts in one episode when part 1 drops, and in addition to that, me and Megan do an Afterthoughts episode at least once a week. So that's us talking about movies or TV shows or other things we've been up to, and just telling you guys our thoughts about it. So if you want to hear about those things, get early access to Genuine Chit-Chat content, early access to a few other bits and pieces that I get up to, as well as some behind the scenes looks at things, including guest spots and photos of the Star Wars comics I tackle on my other show, which get put up there a few days before the episode actually releases and things, those sorts of things. So audio exclusive feed with hours and hours and hours of additional content, supporting the show, and early access to things. So if you would consider that, it would mean the absolute world to me. A link's in the description, but it is patreon.com/genuine chit-chat. And if you want to have a taster of that, there's also a link in the description to mine and Megan's first episode on our Tom Hanks watch, which is we're going through the majority of Tom Hanks movies, and we are just watching them throughout 2022. And if you want to hear our discussion on Big, which Megan had not seen before, then you can click the link in the description or type in bit.ly/TomHanks1 and it'll take you straight to the Patreon post where you can listen completely for free. So in addition to that, my friends, please make sure you check out the show notes for all of Melissa's contact details on her various social media platforms. And in addition to that, you can find details of the guest spots I've been involved with, like the 4th episode of the Comics in Motion Book Club. I've also been on Star Wars Timeline quite a few times. I've got at least one collaboration coming up at some point in the next week or two, I believe. So I'll talk about that when that episode has been released as well. And then there's just details of the Star Wars podcast and all the other sort of bits and pieces I get into, including my social media, which you can follow at Genuine Chit-Chat on Instagram, Twitter, and on Facebook. So lots of different ways to get into contact. And you can also support the show by reviewing on iTunes or Good Pods or anywhere like that, including Spotify. You can share with your friends, you can tell them all about this, post on social media, all those usual things, as well as the standard supporting me on Patreon and just listening to the show as you are doing right now. And what we've got coming up, I've got Shaudo returning to the podcast to talk about, well, music most likely, because that's what he's known for. And then I've got 2 individuals who are authors, and both of them write comic books as well, so I'm very excited to speak to each of those individuals. And they've got a few other things in the pipeline as well, which I will not talk about yet. But not going to have this a very long outro, because I've just got stuff to do today, because it's my birthday weekend, so I'm going to do laser tag and stuff in the woods. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening, as always. I appreciate each and every one of you listening all the way up till the very end, and I'll talk to you guys next week with part 2 of my chat with Melissa Morgan.
You have just experienced host, creator, everything elser of Genuine Chit-Chat, and also the host and creator of Star Wars comics and canon, found on the Comics in Motion podcast, Mike Burton.